For 9 years, she quietly shaped the early life of Prince George. Known to only a few and seen by even fewer, his private nanny was suddenly dismissed. But it was what she did next that truly stunned the palace. Her name was rarely mentioned, as discretion was part of the role. Stay close, but remain invisible. For George, that person was Maria Teresa Turrion-Barallo. Maria began caring for George in 2014, when he was just 8 months old. A graduate of the prestigious Norland College, which trains nannies for high-profile families, she was chosen not only for her expertise but for her ability to maintain privacy. Dressed in the recognizable brown Norland uniform, she blended into the background at public events. To the outside world, she was barely noticeable, but to George, she was a constant presence. She understood him in a way few others could. From a young age, George was quiet, disliked sudden changes, and found comfort in routine. Maria adapted her care to suit his temperament. Unknown to many, she was selected only after a rigorous vetting process by Prince William and Catherine, who were determined to raise their son with as much normalcy as a royal life would allow. Maria wasn't new to childcare, but this role was unlike any other. She wasn't just looking after a child, she was caring for the future king. Her day often began before sunrise, walking silently through the palace to George's nursery. She would check the room's temperature, lay out his clothes, and prepare his bottles, always careful to respect the boundary between staff and family. Still, she didn't see herself as just an employee. She was part of something sacred, the quiet moments of a child's early life. George was a joyful baby. His laughter echoed through the palace, bringing smiles wherever it reached. Maria learned his cues, how his nose scrunched before he cried, how he relaxed when looking at books filled with animals. She was there for his milestones, his first baba, the day he stood in his playpen, the moment he clapped along to If You're Happy and You Know It. Though she was never meant to replace his parents, William and Catherine remained deeply involved. Royal duties often took them away. That's when Maria stepped in. She was there at breakfast, helped him take his first steps, and stayed up when teething pain kept him awake. She never overstepped or spoke about how he was raised, but a strong bond formed between them. She would sing old Spanish lullabies her mother once sang to her, and George would rest peacefully on her shoulder. When George turned 2, a photographer was brought in to capture his birthday portrait. Just out of the camera's frame stood Maria, holding a toy to make him laugh, speaking in the silly, familiar phrases only he understood. The world saw a grinning boy, but for Maria, the magic happened in the moments before the shutter clicked. As George started nursery school, Maria adjusted once again. Each morning, she carefully packed his bag, clothes, snacks, and a small toy, before walking him to the car. She bent down and whispered, "Be kind, and listen well." George noticed everything. He asked why Maria always wore the same blue coat and once mimicked her Spanish accent, not to mock, but to understand. She taught him simple Spanish phrases, which became their secret code. "Buen dia, Maria," he would say proudly. Their trust deepened. Maria never raised her voice. A glance or a soft word was enough. When George asked why people waved at their car, she answered gently, "Because they care about your family. Seeing you makes them smile." That simple truth stayed with him. To outsiders, the palace could feel overwhelming, rigid and filled with pressure. But inside the nursery, Maria created a haven of calm and comfort. She brought normalcy to a boy whose image was already stamped on commemorative plates. On his 5th birthday, after the formal celebration ended, Maria prepared a small surprise in the staff area, homemade cupcakes and a decorated table. When George arrived and saw it, his face lit up. "Did you make these?" he asked. "Just for you," she smiled. "Always." But not every day was perfect. George had difficult days, just like any child. He could be moody, frustrated, or stubborn. Maria didn't scold him for his emotions, she helped him name them. "Are you frustrated or just tired?" she'd ask. "Frust," he'd repeat. "Then let's talk about it," she'd reply, with patience and care. When Princess Charlotte was born, Maria's place in the family remained steady. Though another nanny joined the household, Maria stayed close to George. They walked the palace gardens collecting leaves and sticks, his treasures. On rainy days, they played quiet games and puzzles. She celebrated each small win, smiling when he fit the last puzzle piece in place. During a family trip to Scotland when George was 6, Maria joined them. Most days were spent outside, skipping stones across the lake or looking for bird nests. Evenings were spent in the library by the fire, reading stories. George would often fall asleep mid-sentence, his head resting on her shoulder, his fingers clutching the edge of her sweater. Maria had seen it all, every skinned knee, lost tooth, blown-out candle, and hard-earned lesson. She stayed up when he had fevers, wiped away tears, and cheered at his first football goal. Deep down, she knew this chapter would eventually end. Nannies never stay forever. Still, she hoped for more time. She was grateful for the trust of a little boy who was never truly allowed to be just a child, and for the quiet knowledge that while she may never be in the spotlight, she had helped shape the early years of a future king in ways no photograph ever could. By the time George turned 7, his nursery had changed. The baby toys were gone, replaced by books, toy planes, and signs of a thoughtful, curious mind. The days when Maria fed him porridge and helped him wear soft shoes were gone. These days, her morning started with getting his school clothes ready, packing his books, and helping him learn new words before his ride to Thomas's Battery School. Life inside Kensington Palace had changed. George's school days were now very busy. During the week, he had lessons, sports, piano practice, and sometimes had to appear at public events. Maria was still an important part of his day, but things were not the same as before. She no longer needed to carry him. Now, she watched as he ran ahead by himself. George was becoming more grown up. He started packing his own school bag. He asked if he could try tying his tie on his own, but he still came to Maria for small things. He would visit her workroom to show her something he made at school or to ask for help with his shoelace. Maria changed with him, like she always had. She gave him the space he needed but stayed nearby. She now spent more time helping with his daily plans, cooking meals he liked on quiet days, and listening to his thoughts or questions. When George turned 8, he started asking bigger questions, not just the usual why, but questions that showed he was thinking deeply. One night, after he went to a charity event with his mother, he asked Maria, "Do all children have beds?" She gave him a soft but honest answer, "No, not every child has a bed." His silence afterwards said more than any question. The royal family had also gotten bigger. Charlotte had grown into a confident little girl, and Louis, though still very small, was full of energy. The Cambridge home was always busy. Maria still focused mostly on George, but she also helped with the others. Sometimes she read with Charlotte or looked after Louis when another nanny wasn't there. Even so, her connection with George was special. In public, George often stood with his parents. He wore a smart jacket, kept his hands together, and looked serious. But at home, he was still just a boy. He asked questions about his title, why he needed guards, and why strangers always took his pictures. Maria answered in a way he could understand. "People expect a lot from you," she said once, "but that doesn't mean you can't be yourself." She helped him hold on to the parts of himself that had nothing to do with being royal, his love for animals, his interest in drawing, the way he laughed and forgot about everything else while playing board games. There were trips to the countryside, weekends at Anmer Hall, and beach days when the schedule allowed it. During those times, Maria stayed out of sight when needed, but she was always close. She packed George's bag carefully. She watched from a short distance while he played cricket. She gave small signs when it was time to come in and eat. When George turned 9, people began to see more of his royal role. He went to his first Wimbledon match and met more important people. He stood taller, he spoke more clearly. But to Maria, he was still the same boy, the one who stopped to help a hurt bird or left her little notes at breakfast. Sometimes the notes simply said gracias to thank her for helping with homework. Sometimes, things change in quiet ways. One autumn, during a school break, George spent most of the day in the library with his dad reading about old explorers. Maria had set up craft supplies for them to use together, something they had done for years. But George walked past the table without looking. Her heart sank a little, but she didn't say anything. She packed up the crafts and made tea instead. It wasn't that he didn't care anymore, it just meant he was growing up. And she understood that. By the time George turned 10, he had joined more sports teams with set schedules. He was growing fast, and his thoughts were getting stronger. He really liked football and had started to enjoy learning about history, especially the World Wars. He asked more serious questions now. He compared dates, remembered facts, and even corrected Charlotte when she got something wrong. Maria still helped in the little things, cleaning the mud off his shoes after football, making sure he packed enough snacks for school trips, giving him space when he needed it but always checking on him later. That year, George had a school trip where he would sleep away from home for 3 nights. It was the first time since he was very little. Maria helped pack his bag with care, warm clothes, a flashlight, and waterproof boots. Before he left, he gave her a small nod. "I'll be fine," he said. She believed him. When he came back, he seemed taller, or maybe it just felt that way. He walked in with more confidence and talked to his brother and sister like someone a little older. He didn't come to find Maria right away, but a few hours later, he found her in the staff sitting room, quietly reading. "I remembered everything," he said. "Didn't lose a thing." She smiled. "I knew you would." George's time was now mostly filled with things he had to do. Prince William and Princess Catherine tried to protect him from too much stress, but some things couldn't be avoided. A title came with responsibilities. Maria's job had quietly changed. She wasn't planning his days anymore. Instead, she helped from the background. She had become a quiet part of his life, not because she was no longer important, but because what she was there to do had changed. The family had also started to talk about changes for the future. William and Catherine brought in new advisors. George's learning team was getting bigger. Now he was being taught by teachers who knew about history, leadership, and how governments work. This led to something unexpected. One morning, Maria was asked to come to a private meeting. The room was quiet. Catherine sat next to William. They spoke in a kind and respectful way. They thanked her for her years of care, for her hard work, her trust, and the role she played in George's early life. Then they carefully explained that George was now at a stage where he didn't need a nanny in the same way. His new teachers would now help him grow into a young adult. This was part of a plan that had been made ahead of time. Maria sat quietly for a moment. She had always known this day would come, but hearing the words made it feel final in a way she hadn't prepared for. She asked just one question: "When do I stop?" Catherine looked at her. "We thought you should choose." "But George already knows. He wants to talk to you." Maria left the room and went upstairs. George was sitting by the window, drawing. He stood up when he saw her. "Mom told me," he said softly. "I don't want things to change." Maria gave a small smile and shook her head. "You're growing up and it's time." He didn't speak again, but he didn't look away either. She didn't cry, not then. That night she packed the few things she had in the staff area, some books, a drawing George had made when he was 5 in a frame, a notebook filled with memories from when he was little. The next morning she walked him to breakfast one last time. He sat next to her. He ate quietly. When he finished, he gave her a small wrapped gift. Inside was a leather notebook. On the first page, in his handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for being my first teacher." She left Kensington Palace that afternoon. No interviews, just a quiet walk down the back steps she had used for almost 10 years. But what she did next was something no one expected. Maria Barallo left Kensington Palace quietly. There was no public statement. The palace helped her move into a small home in West London. Her daily life also changed. No more early starts or pressed uniforms. No more meetings with staff. Her mornings were silent, and she let them stay that way. 2 weeks later, she got a message, not from William or Catherine, but through the palace office. It said George had settled into his new routine. His school advisors were now fully in charge. Maria would stay on the books for 6 months in case they needed her, but she had no tasks for now. She turned down a job offer from another wealthy family. It came through Norland College, where she trained. They had 2 kids and lived in Belgravia. She didn't ask questions. She wasn't ready to start again. 3 months later, she visited a retired nanny in Bath. They talked about what it felt like to leave the children you cared for, and what came after. Maria didn't say much about George, but she spoke of him kindly. When asked if she missed him, she said, "Of course I do." Back in London, she had little contact with the palace. Sometimes letters were forwarded to her, some from children, others from Norland students. She replied to them all clearly and kindly. Surprisingly, in the 5th month she got a letter from the palace listing items she'd left: a cardigan, a notebook, and a child's drawing of a dog, clearly George's. They were sent to her, no note included. She placed the drawing in a drawer. At 6 months, her role officially ended. The Duke and Duchess sent a thank you note, hand-delivered. She read it once, then placed it with the drawing. But it didn't stop there. 8 months in, she got a call from the palace. George was preparing for a big public trip. They asked if she could help for a week. She said yes. She returned through the staff entrance. George greeted her briefly, taller now. They went over his routines and travel needs. She stayed professional and quiet. Before she left, he gave her a folded paper. She opened it on the train. It was a drawing, another dog, with the name Marta. She didn't return again. Life moved on. George appeared more in public, standing tall, speaking less like a child. Maria watched from afar, quietly. She later helped start a support program for retired nannies. You don't raise children to keep them close. You raise them to walk away, and to walk wisely. Did the royal family quietly regret letting her go? Or do you think they should have kept Maria even if George had outgrown the need for a nanny? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen and you will enjoy it.